Hey, this is going to be a long video of just a lot of talking, so just leave it on the background, listen to it while you do some other work. Enjoy. Hey, this is Intercactus. So, the competitive community recently, it's been growing quite a bit. I take some of the credit, but it's obviously not all from me. But recently a few of the best players have been working on a spreadsheet, mainly AJ, in my opinion, the best player I know. That's a lie. Top two. But he's amazing at the game. Huge respect to him. Definitely listen to him if he gives you any advice, because it's gonna be worth it. And what he's done is he's putting in the bulk of the work of making a spreadsheet about yokai viability, and we're just kind of giving him feedback. So he's recently just finished yokai 1 through 67, Sigh-Durr through to Camellia, so the whole Brave tribe in the first section of Medallion. And what I'm going to do, he's given me permission to do this, is I'm going to go through the spreadsheet as tribe sections of the Medallion are finished and make a video about them, just for convenience, so you don't have to just look through the whole spreadsheet to find something. So let's just get this started. So we'll start with Sigh-Durr, first yokai, unviable, completely unviable. He's fast, he's brave, E rank, which is pretty good, but his ultimate is horrendous. It's just a column, it's not very strong, and it has a chance to hit him, to just not do anything and hit himself. So it's probably one of the worst ultimates in the game. His skill is pretty useless, boosting combo damage isn't really too important, so it's never going to come into effect really. If you want a fast attacker in the low rank, so you can use an ARS rank attacker if you can, but if you want a low rank attacker that can do Sigh-Durr's job way better, use Slugger. Slugger we'll talk about in a bit, but he's basically one of the best low rank attackers in Brave. His attack does have boosted crit chance, but there are a lot better options in Brave for critical attackers, so he's completely unviable. So now we move on to Flippit. He's situational because he is a low rank tank, which is brilliant, is an LRT, and he counters slip up. But that's really all he does. There are way better tank options in Brave that we'll talk about in a while, but the fact that he counters slip up makes him really viable. So you can use him on teams that need to counter hazards, because slip up is the best one. So you're gonna be fighting him a lot. He's one of the best, top 5 yokai in the game, so you will be fighting slip up a hell of a lot. So Flippit is useful, but he's situational because he's not always going to be useful. So next we were talking about Pandal, and he is viable. He's quite viable, which might be a surprise to some people, but not to me. He's E rank, brave, and then he has a skill that boosts his crit chance. So this means he can just be a Ultimate spammer. He can be a Ultimate spammer specifically on crit teams, because that's where he's going to perform the best. As a general Brave Ultimate spammer, Lion is better, and we'll talk about him in a second, but Pandal is just a good crit attacker with a really fast charging ultimate, so you can work with him really easily. And he evolves into Undi, who's completely unviable, because he's basically Pandal, but without a faster charging ultimate, so there's really no use. He's one of those evolutions that's just completely outclassed by their pre-evolution, and also by his recolor Tanbo, who is quite viable. He's incredibly fragile, but he is low rank and he has 2 slots and the same skill as Pandal, which is boosting his crit chance but also boosting the chance he has to get crit. So he's one of those attackers you don't have to use on crit teams. Probably the best one of the better low rank physical attackers with 2 slots. So you can work with him really easily. There are a lot of ways you can build Tanbo, so he's very, very viable. So the whole Cutta-nah-nah, the whole Cutta-nah line is completely unviable. They're only unique because they have the skill that reflects damage, which is horrendous, and they're the only ones who have it in Brave, but it's horrendous in 3, because it reflects 25% of the damage you take, and if you want to be taking damage, you gotta be in the front tanking, which means you're probably going to be holding a shielding soul, which means you're going to be taking less damage, which means it's going to reflect less damage, which means it does nothing. The skill does nothing. There are so many better ways to penalise enemies' physical attackers in Brave, so they're completely useless. Bushido and Washogun are also completely unviable. Terrible stats. Their skill, absolutely useless, and their soul ultimate, maybe, but why? It's the only one. They're the only yokai in Brave that have a soul ultimate that's an AoE Purify, but that's one of the worst ultimate effects in the game. There's no point using either of them. Washogun's does have the added benefit of healing HP, but it's not that good. Lion is very viable. As we were talking about earlier, he's like if Pandal had 2 item slots. So he doesn't have a skill, which is pretty annoying, but you can work around it. It's not too big of a drawback. It's still really good. Give him a Stealth Soul or a Charged Soul, or both. Give him both because he has 2 slots, and he's just going to be one of the greatest Ultimate spammers. Lionheart, he's also really viable. He can hold 2 Suicide Souls, so you can use him basically like an A rank equivalent of Crummy Mummy in Brave. Well, Crummy Mummy would be better damage wise 99% of the time, but Lionheart is still viable because of his tribe. Because like Shady is a terrible tribe, so it's hard to make Crummy Mummy fit on. It's really easy to fit Crummy Mummy on teams, but at the same time it's really difficult. So Lionheart is just great because you can fit him on Brave teams really easily if you need a suicide. And he also still has 2 item slots, so he can spam soul ultimates, really strong soul ultimates because of his strength stat. It's just going to do a lot. Not as good as his pre-evolution, but it is a different pattern, so you can use it if you want it. So yeah, he's pretty good. He's really good. Hissfit Extremely Situational. He's E rank, and he's got high strength, and he has a fast charging X patterns ultimate, which could potentially be useful, but 99% of the time he's outclassed by Pandal, Lion, and Lionheart, so he's extremely situational. Meanwhile, Zerberker is completely unviable, because other attackers in the A rank are just way better without having a skill as bad as his. Sure, his strength is really high, but there are just way too many better options to even think about using Zerberker. Snartle is extremely situational as well. Benkei, usually better in every scenario, but Snartle is way faster. Benkei is one of the slowest yokai in the game, and Snartle actually has a workable spirit stat. It's a very considerable difference. He's not great, and he does require an S rank slot, and he has a different ultimate than Benkei, which is not ideal because the X pattern is a lot more common than the weird pattern Benkei has. So 99% of the time you're going to want to use Benkei, but Snartle can work on some teams. Not a lot, but some teams. Brutal, on the other hand, is very viable. His skill lets him ignore Stealth Soul. It may seem like a negative at first, being only able to attack the yokai in front, but it's actually a really huge benefit because of the breaking of Stealth Soul. Because there are strong team archetypes that like they really heavily rely on Stealth Soul, so you can't really rely on Stealth Soul because it's just gonna get hard countered by Brutal. It's not worth it. Brutal isn't gonna be on every team, of course, but you have to be careful. So it's really easy to create a lot of pressure with Brutal because you can just, they'll see the Brutal and they'll know, oh god, Brutal is really strong. He's got the second highest strength in the game, if I remember correctly, and he's brave. So you're gonna want to have to move your yokai out of the way, which just means you're gonna force them into a different position, which is gonna be quite annoying. And you can also do that with the Soul Ultimate, which is, it sets up lava tiles, and lava tiles are different from fire tiles because they use his physical attack stat. This uses strength stat rather than spirit, so it's still going to do great damage even though he's no spirit, so you can use that to pressure even harder. He's just so good. Mochismo, great 2 item slot tank in crit teams because like he's probably the best tank for crit teams. A lot of the good crit attackers like Tanbo, Chansin, Hovernyan Unviable, they're all brave, so it's really easy to fit together a brave unity on crit teams with Mochismo. But like you can't really use him outside of crit teams. You can if you want. I do know of a man who uses 6 Mochismo teams. It's a team of 6 Mochismo, and it's evil. I hope I never have to fight it, but I probably will at some point. So that can counter it, and that is a very viable team strategy. You can totally go for that, but he's not going to be good in every situation, so we call him situational. Minochi though, he's just a downgrade, just completely, because Mochismo has a better skill and better stats. Well, he's better HP, and Minochi has a bit more defense and attack than Mochismo, sorry. But what his skill does, right? His skill is so stupid. It means he gets +1 spirit and strength for every 10 points of defense he has, which is just horrible. I don't know why anyone would ever want to use Minochi over Mochismo or Slumberhog, who we'll talk about in just a minute. Minimoto is pretty good. Situational though, but really good. They can be a Ultimate spammer. They're probably the best Ultimate spammer with a Columns Ultimate in the game, in my opinion anyway, because they have 1 move timer, so you can just fucking swish them around the board as Charged Soul every other turn. It could be annoying to just sit there, it'd be really boring, but it's pretty useful. And he can also be good on stall teams with a Red Rush Soul because of his skill. Now on to Slumberhog. Slumberhog is one of the best 2-item slot tanks in the game. He's low rank, very bulky, good HP, can be even way bulkier on Sigh-Durr teams because that'll make his defense stat 200 instead of being 60, so he can take damage incredibly well there. And he also has a quite strong ultimate, and you can even use him as a low rank equivalent of Lionheart, so just incredibly viable, really useful. I use him on a lot of teams, absolutely consider him. Snartlehog Situational, because like he's like Mochismo, way more offensive, because what his skill is just extreme critical. So if you have, he's only useful on crit teams, mainly because of that. Just being able to he can do good damage. He's a very good defensive tank on crit teams, and he has very high strength, but he is quite slow, so you have to think about that. But he's pretty good. You should consider him on crit teams if you need to. Samureel, very viable, one of the main strength buffers in competitive yokai watch. You can run him with a Charged Soul if you want. Let me just scroll down. You can run him with Charged Soul if you want, but usually he's played with a Shielding Soul as a tank because his defensive stats are quite good. So he's just like a tank that also does the buffing, but you can run him with Charged Soul on some teams. Time Keeler, he's not unviable, but he's extremely situational. He's like Snartlehog. He's very similar to Snartlehog. He's got slightly different stat spreads. He's got Water Element, which means he resists water, which is a very common weakness in the Brave tribe, so it can be useful. He's got an X ultimate like Snartlehog, and he has a kind of an awful skill. I wouldn't like say it's good, but it's better as a tank skill than extreme critical. Just like as a dedicated tank, but he's not a dedicated tank, he's an offensive tank, so he can be useful in a few teams, but generally you wouldn't like him, so we'll say extremely situational for this. Goofball is completely unviable, bad skill, horrible stats. There's no reason to use him over Slugger, mainly, but most options. And speaking of Slugger, he's situational because, again, a lot of Brave teams, see, with your ANS slots, they're usually used by attackers, so you can use Slugger if you're really starved for slots. And he is really good because he's got a very high base power attack and a skill that means the negative effects of that attack are negated, because like that attack, his physical attack is likely to miss. It's coded so that it's more likely to miss, but his skill makes his attacks always hit, and he also never loafs, and he has quite good stats, so he's just like your generic low rank attacker if you need an attacker in Brave. Helmsman is pretty much the same as Samureel, except his skill buffs the defense stat instead of the strength stat, and defense buffing is probably the worst buff to get in the game, mainly because it doesn't actually help you against magic teams. So Helmsman is just totally unviable. Reuknight is situational. He is a great defensive tank in the A rank. That he's got one of the highest attack stats in the game, or strength stats, I don't know. Yeah, strength stats. and he does have quite good bulk as well, so you can use him. There are some better options, but you can use him if you want. But Corpton, he is S rank, but he is probably one of the best S rank offensive tanks in the game. I don't know if I call him the best one in Brave, but he's definitely up there. He's got one of the highest strength stats in the game as well. I think he's like top 5. And then great bulk as well. And he has the added benefit of countering 2 very common builds of Solar Enma. You can counter Solar Enma with the Soaking Soul and Solar Enma plus Mython. You can even run him with Mython if you want, but I wouldn't recommend it. But he's quite a good Solar Enma counter. You can work with him really easily. He can't counter basic Solar Enma, but Bishamantan exists for that anyway, so he's just really good, really underrated. You should totally consider him. Slice and Rice, totally unviable. Horrific skill. It hits like Swelton for strong damage, and like is there any others that it actually matters on? Let's have a look. A list of Oni. I think it's only Swelton that it actually matters for. BBQvil as well. BBQvil, really good tank, we'll talk about in a second. And is there anybody else that actually cares? Takoyaking, maybe. Not a lot of people use him though. I do, but I shouldn't. He'll be better on that team I use him on. Yeah, basically only BBQvil and Swelton care, so it's not useful, and his stats are awful, so like there's no reason to use him. Flamurice though. Flamurice I wouldn't say is good. He's got the same skill. He does have a Hazard's ultimate though. He's got the same ultimate as Brutal, so you can work with that really easily. But still, he's very situational, extremely situational. I wouldn't. You can make space for him. You can use him if you need. He can combo with Brutal. Like, you could have maybe 2 Brutals and a Flamurice to just fill their board with hazards if you wanted to. But generally he's just really situational, and you wouldn't really want to use him on a lot of teams. Tublappa is totally unviable. The skill is the same as Bushido's, which is horrific. Stats suck. There's no reason to use them. But lapping it up is very viable. See, hard counters to Donchan, Dumbcap, and some other buffers, but those are the main 2 that it affects. And he's just a strong attacker, so just slap a Cell Soul on him and he can chill and just take in buffs, be a strong attacker. Really worth it, really viable. Basic El Gutso, very viable. He's an extremely good skill. It hits S ranks for more damage, and a lot of the best tanks in the game are S rank. Just a lot of the best Yokai in the game are S rank. Not only can it hit stuff like Cubot, Venoctobot, Ultimate Hovernyan, stuff like that for way more damage. You can also hit like Pandora and what's it called? And even like Shielding Soul Infinite Enma, which is decently common. You don't see it too much, but there are a lot of strong S ranks that use Shielding Soul. So it just helps a lot. And he's got a really fast charging soul ultimate because he's D rank and good stats, so just incredibly good. I do fight a team on the regular from one guy. You know who you are. That he uses 6 of them. He sent me a whole guide on how to use it, and I'm like, I don't want to use this. I'm not going to use 6 El Gutso, but I digress. El Gutso Grande, never use him. He's completely outclassed by El Gutso. You probably know why by now. Mudmunch is completely unviable as well, because he's just worse than Slumberhog. There's no reason to use him over Slumberhog. BBQvil is very viable. Great LRT and Brave, and he can heal himself and buff himself with the ultimate, so it's really easy to work with. You can just slap him on a lot of Brave teams and it'll do you well. Lyrebird is a pretty interesting pivot. Really, he's situational. He's immune to ultimates, not hazards, but you can get around this with a weightless soul like I did in my last team. We're actually seeing a lot more of weightless soul Lyrebird and Hovernyan as of late. I am anyway, so it's becoming a lot more common. Might be fun to try and build that again, but he's just a really interesting, really useful pivot. You can bring him in if you need to, and he can just do you well. So, and he has good fast charging ultimate, so you can use him as a ultimate spammer, I suppose. But like, Weightless Soul is better on him usually, because that means he can just counter every single type of ultimate in the game. Moving on, BBQvil. The spreadsheet says situational, but I would hazard calling him viable, because he's like Snartle but a tank. He's really slow, like I think bottom 20 speed in the game, but he has great strength. He has great strength, great rank flexibility. You can use him at BA or S, and he'll be doing good. A really rare ultimate in physical attackers, because it can actually hit the back row. The only other ones I can think of are like Gutsy Bones, Hardy Hound. So being able to hit the back row with your ultimate as a brave yokai, that's really good. So I'd call him viable, but the spreadsheet says situational, so I suppose I'll go with that. He's situational, but very good, very good. You should totally consider him. B3-NK1 is basically like BBQvil. He's got a better move. He's very similar. He's got lower strength, but he has a better defensive element and speed and HP and movement cooldown. So you can use him as well, but if you prefer, it's mainly the move timer you're looking for. So if that fits your team better, go for it. Blazion and Quaken, both really unviable. So they've got an alright skill. You can use them if you need, but like their stats are so odd. They're mixed attackers for whatever reason, even though they're in brave. And you'd rather use other yokai. There's just no reason to use them. They're both unviable. Siro though. Siro is much better because he's actually a physical attacker. He's all into physical. He's got the same skill, which is just a buff to his strength and spirit whenever somebody in your team dies, so you can use him on suicide teams. And he has a buffing ultimate, which is incredibly helpful. So he's just generally really good on teams like that. And then Chanson is he's like Siro for crit teams, because his skill directly benefits off the crit boosting because it lets him do more crits. He has a higher crit rate, but he is incredibly fragile, so you'd want to run him with Stealth Soul and just have him there doing his thing, because he can do good damage and he can do buffing with his ultimate, so he's pretty damn good. Sheen is situational. He's like, we'll talk about Sheen and Gleam in one go, because we'll talk about Gleam first, because Sheen is just like, he's just worse than Gleam, but also better, because Gleam is S rank, and you'd think Hovernyan completely outclasses him, but he is bulkier, so he can fend himself a bit better against Brutal, and just generally. Because Stealth Soul doesn't just protect you. You have to still worry about your yokai being somewhat bulky so they can actually deal with the stuff. Especially on crit teams, because they're going to be taking crits. So you have to think about that. And then Sheen is just like Gleam, but A rank. And you can potentially use him with a soul gem that lets him break guard. A guard breaking soul gem, which can be very helpful as well. So both of those are situational, but Snee's completely unviable. Horrendous skill, pretty bad stats, and a terrible ultimate. There's no reason to use him. Basic Hovernyan, it says unviable here, but I did see a team earlier that actually used two of him. I'll leave it in the description below. And it looks pretty good, so I would call him extremely situational. He is A rank, but like, he's still useful. You can use him if you want to. And then Moximous N, also extremely situational. Chimera Soul is an evasion boost, and not many yokai can actually use this very well, but Moximous N is one of them. It's really RNG dependent, and I wouldn't recommend it, but you can use it. It's very possible. It's just extremely situational. And Moximous K is completely unviable because he's basically just the same thing as Moximous N except for spirit. And while the evasions go for magic attacks is a lot less common. It's a lot less common. He's a spirit attacker in Brave. That's obviously bad. He's completely unviable. Don't use him. Hot Air Buffoon. He's good tank because of his high HP stat and alright defense, and he can blow up, which can be quite nice. BBQvil mostly would be better, but he can explode, which could potentially be useful. It lines up quite well with what's it called, X ultimates if you want to do that, but it's not going to be useful on every team, so we call him situational. Sushiyama is unviable, totally unviable. Sushiyama is unviable. He's got really bad accuracy. He's almost never gonna hit. He does have guard break, but you could just use Slugger with a soul gem, with a guard breaking soul gem, and it would be so much better. Just don't use Sushiyama, or you could even use Durago if you have an S slot. Kapunki is, I don't think Kapunki is good, but the spreadsheet said extremely situational. His Mochismo is just a lot better as an attacker and a tank, but Kapunki you'd think could work as an attacker, but he has really bad accuracy, so he wouldn't. But he could potentially counter Mummy. No, I don't think he should be extremely situational. I think he should be unviable. But the spreadsheet says extremely situational, so we'll go with that. Beetler, unviable. Use Slugger. Big tall, extremely situational. Intimidation is a pretty bad skill, but it does do well on Red Rush soul teams. So you can use him as a defensive tank there, but outside of Red Rush, Reuknight is usually better. Quench is the same as B-Tall, but S rank, so don't use him. He's just worse. Mochismo is quite viable. He's a good tank, and he's got a brilliant skill. He can take soul ultimates really well. It is countered by Decisive Blow, which is something I've talked about way too much recently, but I digress. It still could be annoying. You should not abuse the 1 HP skills at all. Do not abuse them, because they're so easily countered by Decisive Blow. So I'd say don't use more than one Mochismo, and if you're using Mochismo, really consider the rest of your team and think, do I need a 1 HP soul here? Am I using something like Arachneval or Bitter Batter, or really anything that would want a 1 HP skill or soul gem? And if you are, then switch out Mochismo for another tank, because it's not going to be helpful, and it's just going to be a net negative for your team, because it's going to be way easier to counter. Momonyan, he's fine. Very situational, but you can use him. You can use him with the Fukurukuju soul, so when he dies he heals your allies, and since he revives himself, we have 2 of those. If your attackers are bulky enough, it can be quite useful if you're fighting like hazards or Ultima spam. But there is a big issue, and that's that Hovernyan is just better because you have more flexibility. You can use Momonyan if you want, but Hovernyan could do the exact same thing without wasting an A slot, so you have to consider that first. Nyanzalot is quite viable. One of the best magic tanks in the tribe. He's weak to fire, so you can counter that. You can hit him pretty hard with Solar and Bitter Batter, or just any strong fire attacker. And his skill, it's worse. It's not great, but I know it is great. But Jarguard is better. The only reason Nyanzalot is viable is because of his tribe, but the fact that he is Brave Tribe and he has this skill makes him really good, so you should definitely consider him if you need the Brave Unity and you don't have a magic tank. Sergeant Burley, pretty situational. He's got a good skill, and his Ultimate is, if his Ultimate was a strength buff, he'd probably be much better, but it's an all up, so I mean it charges slower than other buffing Ultimates, and he's got pretty bad stats for an A rank, probably because he used to be a C rank, but now he's an A rank and his stats stuck now for an A rank, so it's not worth using him on a lot of teams. You usually just want to use Siro or Chansin or Samureel, but you can if you use him if you want. I wouldn't recommend it though. Bison Burley, his skill is alright. He's got alright bulk, and he is S rank, so very hard to fit him on teams. So you can use him as a tank all up buffer if you need, but like there are better choices. You wouldn't want to use him. You can make him work, but he's very situational. I wouldn't recommend him on a lot of teams. Demuncher does have high defense, but he's got 8 HP. So if you want an S rank offensive tank in Brave, then use Bishamanten or Corpton or even Eldorago. They're just going to be better. And then for Devourer, he's just a Muncher but with Spirit, and he's a spirit attacker in a physical tribe. Just use Phoenix because Phoenix has got top 3 Spirit, so you're gonna get better Spirit damage, and you're gonna get the Brave Unity. So it's gonna be just better than Devourer. And then Illuminoct, pretty bad. I wouldn't say bad stats, but they're mediocre. They're not great for an S rank, and 99% of the time his skill is not going to come into effect, so like it's not going to be helpful. So he's just unviable. If you can make him work, great, but nah, I wouldn't use him. Arachneval, you can build around him. He's pretty cool. I want to try building around him at some point, but he is quite situational. It's pretty risky to use him. Because he's very, very easily countered. But if you don't have things that can counter him, then he's pretty good. You can play him with like Mumbles or Got It Made. I actually think Got It Made is really underrated, but we'll get to her when we talk about Heartful in the coming weeks. Arachneval is quite good. So, and it's a pretty fun team from what I've seen. So if you want to try building around it, go for it. Shuriken situational, but really fun attacker, because what his skill does is he hits behind the target for the exact same damage. You think, like it just uses the exact same numbers, and you can use him with the blow away soul to just pressure the enemy really badly. If you pair him with Brutal, you can counter Stealth Soul, and you can get the full Brave Tribe bonus, but like Sat to the Bone is easier to fit in teams, and he's stronger usually. But you can use Shuriken if you want. He's pretty damn good. Nunchucky, they say situational here, but I'd want to call him extremely situational. You can also use him as a blow away soul attacker, and he can create a lot of issues for what's it called, safe columns, which is like a tank and then 2 yokai behind it. He can cause a lot of issues for those, but there are similar or better options in other tribes. Brave tribe is really good, and being in a brave or mysterious tribe makes you automatically like way more viable. Mainly referring to Sir Nans a lot with this one. But Nunchucky is S rank, so he's very hard to fit on teams, but you can use him. He's usable. And then ending it off, we have Camellia, who is very anticlimactically totally unviable. Awful skill. Like, you think it'd be good until you realise A, healers suck arse, and B, you want her attacking rather than using her technique because healers are ass. So it's just never going to come into effect. And her ultimate, it does heal and it hits a column, but it's just like, it's not strong enough, and the healing isn't enough for it to be worth using. So she's totally unviable. I have seen one team using her, but it's not very good. I won't link it in the description because it's bad. Actually, no, I probably will. If I can find it, I will. But if I can't, I won't. So yeah, that's it. This is long as shit. Like, really long. Why is it so long? I will be doing this as the rest of the tribes finish. So as soon as the mysterious tribe is fully laid out on the spreadsheet, I will record that video and I will put it out for you guys, because I want to. The main purpose of this channel is to educate the people about competitive yokai watch. I think this is going to be a really important and valuable resource for you all to have. So I'll leave the link to the Discord in the description, because there are a lot of helpful people there. You can do battles there. It's just all around a great place to be. A bit weird, but at times, but it's fun. I like the people there, and that's about it. Goodbye. I'll see you when I get another TM idea, or maybe I'll make another scripted video about something, but that's it for now. Bye bye.